Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Aspergers Studio. Today I'm joined with Aspie Comic, Michael McCreary. He's also an actor, he's also an author, and he's also a TEDx speaker. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage because this should be one funny show. So see you there. That's better. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Aspergers Studio. Today I'm joined with Michael McCreary, Aspie Comic, actor, TEDx host, and much, much more. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thanks, Reed. Glad to be on the show, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you. My last name is actually McCreary. It's a bit of a tough one, actually. Yeah, no,
All
the
right,
first
not a
time I ever
problem.
did. Yeah, the first time I ever did a radio show called Accent on Toronto, I remember Martha Chavez, this great Canadian comic, introduced me, and she said, now introducing Michael, I'm so sorry, and that was the introduction that I got. So you did a lot better than me.
All right. What got you into comedy?
Well, when I was in grade 8, I was struggling with a lot of my classes. I wasn't bad at applying myself, but I just wasn't good. Just things weren't clicking, square peg, round hole or whatever. So my folks were looking into some kind of extracurricular activities that I could perhaps take just to give me a little bit of hope. So they stumbled upon this one called the Stand Up for Mental Health program that was operating out of Guelph. And they dealt predominantly with people with like psychological disorders as opposed to neurological variations. So they didn't really take people with like autism, and stuff like that, like ADHD, Down syndrome, stuff like that. I was sort of a special case that they let me in because they were impressed with my audition. So they let me in. David Granier, the guy running the program, taught me everything I know now. We performed after about 2 months worth of classes, workshop stuff. And after that, I took to it. I just kept performing, finding venues where I could perform or wherever people would have me. I think when I was halfway through high school, I got my first gig with like the out in Halifax, where an autism organization asked me if I could do 10 minutes and they were going to pay me for it. So I went, sure, awesome. So when I realized that this wasn't just a hobby, this was something that I could do, like I my ears perked up. So I stuck with it. Anyways, I hope that wasn't too boring or
No, it's very
digressional.
interesting, actually. Now,
Excellent.
would you consider yourself the class clown?
I wasn't really. No, I was usually whenever like I was in a class, I was so anxious about whatever it was, whatever the immediate task was. I couldn't even think about jokes at that time. I was the kid who would always have like his nose in a book because he was just trying to like retain information and stuff wasn't sticking. And of course, I'm the one that the teacher's like, Michael, are you following this? And it's like, yeah, I am, more than everyone else. I'm hanging in there. I was a quiet kid.
All right. Now, what issues do you face on a day-to-day basis dealing with your own autism?
Sure. Well, I'm really lucky because my folks from a very young age helped me procure like an independent education plan. So I was able to really tailor my school experiences to my ASD. So usually what I would struggle with in a classroom environment wasn't the nerves of public speaking or talking in front of people. It was the issue of stimuli, right? It was like being forced to focus on one thing and being unable to do so because there are other people around you pulling focus. Uh, uh, this is where stims become incredibly useful, right? Because you're like, okay, if the world is changing around me, I can always come back to a stim. Like if I'm in a restaurant and I'm trying to focus on the person in front of me, but there's all sorts of clatter and chatter going on around me, or I can see stuff happening in my peripheral vision, I can have a stim to create a constant that I can sort of come back to, if that makes sense. So usually that's the stuff that I experience on the daily, is just trying to maintain a sense of focus or prevent a kind of executive dysfunction or a breakdown in motor skills, right? by having things pull focus. Like usually that's the stuff that I'm trying to work around, but it's I've gotten a lot better at that. So I'm doing
All
okay.
right. Do you have any great stories you can share with us about your time doing stand-up or anything?
Oh man, the sad thing about it is I usually I'm really boring because I'm really workmanlike. So just I show up early, I do my set. Uh, I like to talk to the other comics on the show. I like to talk to people afterwards specifically because usually there's a couple of people in the audience that are really keen on talking to the one autistic guy in the show because usually they are either on the spectrum or they know someone and they have a story that they want to share, and that's always great. I'm so sorry. I'm so boring when it comes to like the shows themselves are kind of unremarkable when you're sort of like, not that the show is bad. The shows are fun. Like I love doing them, but it's just like, oh, it's the same thing. Like I know what I'm going to do. The material will always be different, but you're you're always you hope that the show is unremarkable because if something goes wrong, then you're in trouble. I'll tell you one story about the worst show I've ever done. It was in North York. It was for an autism related organization, I think, and they were doing some kind of an office. They were doing sort of a benefit with all of their donors and whatnot. And it was a very well produced show. Like it was big. There was a lot of people there, big numbers. It was around Christmas time. So in Southern Ontario, I'm sure you get this because you're coming from Chicago, right? In the
Yeah.
Midwest. So like, yeah, you guys get winter pretty bad, right? So
Yeah, we got lucky this year around. Yeah.
okay, sure. Well, we didn't get lucky in Toronto that year. So really, we were hoping to get on by about 8 o'clock in the program. It said Michael McCreary is going to go on at 8 o'clock, do about an hour worth of stand up, 45 minutes to an hour. And then the hope was we would get out of there to beat the snowstorm and drive back to my home. And I didn't go on till about 11 o'clock. And by that point, everyone was thoroughly sloshed. Like everyone was about like 2 dozen drinks in, which you want people to have a couple drinks in because it gets people loose. It gets people being a little bit more honest, more comfortable laughing at jokes. They're not as rigid, but not, you don't want people, you don't want to kill them. Right. So they're really, everyone was really like struggling to keep up with things. Before I go on, the second before I go on, the MC passes me the mic and whispers in my ear, there's about 1,000 people out there, maybe 100 of them speak English. And so that was my night. And then I almost died on the ride home. So like that's the worst show I can think about. But everything else like has been generally fun.
Would you consider your humor your hyper focus?
I mean, like, I wouldn't say that stand up is my special interest, but I would say it's a great, it does keep my perspective focused because, I mean, every stand up is struggling with the knowledge that they have to distinguish themselves from other stand ups, right? Because everyone has observations that are fairly universal, fairly evergreen, and you're trying to find a way to make yourself clear as an individual. What distinguishes you from the other like million comic? So usually I like to use stand up as a forum to disclose my special interest because so long as you can make it funny, it is probably the only place where an autistic guy will be allowed to talk about the thing that he wants to for an hour and people will listen.
Yeah.
So that's I usually see it as more like a vessel for the special interest rather than the special interest itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that kind of does. Do you have any favorite comics yourself?
Yes, Norm Macdonald, who just passed away, was one of my favorites. Like I always really loved him because uh, Norm was always fun because I loved his stand-up, but I really loved him whenever he would do a guest spot on another show because obviously the premise of like a talk show is to prop up the guests. Like they're the attraction. You come here to see this guy. But Norm could take anything and make it the Norm Macdonald show. Like he did I think it was, I don't know, I don't think they ever did it again, but he did the YouTube Comedy Awards where he was co-emceeing with Jenny Slate and just some YouTube guy, I don't know. And he was amazing. Like he just turned it into like a 3-hour Norm Macdonald show. And he was so fearless and fun to watch. So he's great. And I love Anthony Jeselnik because like obviously Norm Macdonald loved gallows humor. Anthony Jeselnik, what I think made him sort of exceptional was just how tight his jokes were, because like he's a one-liner comic, right? So uh, I think he's very aware that the syntax, like the structure of a sentence in like a dead baby joke, is absolutely integral to getting the audience on board. And if that structure isn't there, then you're just a creep talking about things no one wants to talk about. And I think that he's done an incredible magic trick, which is uh, his joke craft is so crisp and so tight. And a lot of that just comes from years of working on like late night shows like Jimmy Fallon, where he's just used to being in a writer's room and just pumping out like hundreds of jokes a day. So for him, his work ethic is just so good. And I think he really primes himself on just getting things down to as few words as possible. And when it's just that quick and it's just that clean, people don't even have time to register the fact that they might have laughed at something that they typically wouldn't. So it's not the kind of stuff that I usually do or even usually seek out, but he's just so good at what he does that he's really hypnotic to watch.
Yeah. What was it like consulting for a TV show? I mean, were you able to meet the stars and schmooze with them?
I didn't get to talk to so that was a CBS show called Ransom. It was a procedural, like a cop show. So obviously, as the name would imply, it's about the guy that goes in and negotiates for the freedom of hostages. In this episode, the guy being held hostage was on the spectrum. And I feel terrible. I just forgot the actor's name. He played Spider-Man on one of the runs of the Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark musical. Really nice guy and a really good performer. That was kind of odd because not him being nice or being good at his job. That's to be expected. I mean, that entire experience of consulting was sort of weird because it's not that there was a communication breakdown, but I was really lucky. I was given the opportunity to come on in and talk to him, and he was really great. And really, I just went into a room with him for like about an hour, 90 minutes, and he just wanted me to get a read on his characterization and the functionality of his character within the script to make sure he wasn't stepping on any toes, and if there was something he could disclose to a writer or a director to make sure that this was authentic. And I'm usually pretty lenient when it comes to that kind of stuff because obviously autism is a spectrum, and you're like, okay, well, the difficult and you're going, okay, I understand that this is potentially one person's experience with ASD, and that's being transposed into this character. But you're also aware of the fact that there really isn't much in the way of variety when it comes to depictions of ASD. So it's kind of tough to hide behind the defense of this is a spectrum when that spectrum isn't necessarily being represented. So I thought he was really thoughtful for being mindful of that. The
And we
tough thing
love.
is
All right.
in television, there's such a quick turnover rate from the writer's room to to the crew to go film that once something's locked in, there's not really much you can do. So like if you needed me to be in there to consult, probably the most useful thing you could do is to have a self-advocacy network in there for the writers room before they've gone on to anything like that. But other shows have been doing that subsequent. Like I think Sesame Street did that briefly.
Yeah, I
With
remember they had a one of the puppets was on the spectrum.
Yeah, and so they had in members of the self-advocacy network in there, which was which was a pretty big deal. I don't know if they're still using them to consult on the show. I understand there was a bit of a falling out there, but I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. Uh, uh, but no, Ransom was interesting because that was just me getting a glimpse behind the curtain of just of sort of the whistles and bells of and let me see if I can list off other cliches
How did how did they contact
of
you?
just working on a show. Uh, they reached out by phone. Like they just I think they went to my website and they emailed me and they said,
Wow.
would you be free for a phone call? And I said, sure. And then they picked my brain. And I think it was probably uh, uh, a little bit pragmatic on their part because when they're saying we want an ambassador from the autism community, I'm not exactly Temple Grandin. And they were just like, who's closest to Toronto? And so I think they were pretty generous in how they got me to be a part of it. But no, it was interesting.
Yeah. Now, what was it like for you giving a TEDx speech? I mean, that had to be. Where did you give it, first of all? Because I know TEDx
Yeah,
is local. It's
sure.
all
That
over
was
the
at
world.
York U. Sure, that was at York University, in like the north part of Toronto or the Greater Toronto area. Uh, yeah, it was it was interesting. I like they really said, hey, can you just do your stand-up show, but but just but I don't know, find the correct ratio of jokes to stats and facts. And I don't normally do slides in my presentation and stuff. So my mom was so I kind of brought her in because she likes to dabble in graphic design. And I know that's a terrible cliche when people go, so and so's into graphic design, and you just see like the church pamphlets with like the Joker man font on them. That's that's not my mom. She was great. So I was like, hey, I'm not usually used to this kind of a oration. Can you help me out here? So she was good in coming in and help me out with that. So I could just worry about the stand-up facet and speak and speaking facets of it. And she helped me out with that. She's a great collaborator, and I always love when she's willing to kind of sit in and help me out with something. That was one of the last things we really collaborated on, but it was a fun day. Like again, just my folks drove me in and I did the show, and I'm just so boring. I'm sorry. Like it's just the most interesting thing about the TED Talk is the thing itself. Everything around it was just, no, everyone was nice. Dr. Weiss was lovely to talk to. Yeah, that was, I'm real boring when it comes to talking about behind the scenes stuff.
So they contacted you. You didn't actually apply for the TED Talk.
I've been super lucky, Reed. This is why my story is unbelievably dull, is because everyone has reached out to me. Like someone will just see me doing stand up somewhere and they'll go, hey, we like what you're doing. Could you try and fit your show into these very specific parameters? And I go, okay. And then that's the story. So that's the story there. That's the story with my show with Chris Hadfield's Generator Show. That's the story with how I got the book done. Was Anik, I think, saw a couple of the the key players at Anik saw me do Accent in Toronto at the Danforth Music Hall, and from that they said, oh wow, okay, let's see, like this guy's on our radar now. Let's have a conversation. So like I love working with people and I really love doing the thing that I do, but actually relaying it, I feel bad because it's not that I'm uncomfortable disclosing it. It's that I'm going, God, I'm sorry, Reed. I am a nightmare guest because you're like, yeah, we got to fill 30 minutes. And I'm like, that's got to be you, buddy. You got to, you got to, you're going to have to drag me across the finish line.
All right. All right. What kind of success did you get from your book?
Mm.
What kind of
Well, it was
did you
really
get a lot of accolades and everything? People coming up to you and saying your book was
Yeah, I was shortlisted on a couple of readers lists, like not readers choice, but like some critics choice lists, and that was really cool. Oh my God, I wish I had the thing in front of me because I mean, obviously, the book came out in 2019, I think is when it went to print, 2019 or yeah, 2019, and so yeah, August of 2019, I think. I could be wrong. So that was in and around the time that we were coming up, we were scraping up against lockdown in the early 2020.
I
So all the benefits that I was able to reap from this, which were like kind of like the accolades and stuff. Unfortunately, it was just sort of an email or a Zoom in kind of thing going like, hey, good job. And I go, hey, thanks, man. And that's so it's fun because I actually kind of like that because it sort of demystifies the idea of like, oh, this is a big deal. This thing comes out, you get an award, this and that. And it's like, no, I guess it is just a thing on a plaque, and that's not a bad thing. It's like, oh, that's really cool. That's fun. And it doesn't need to be this big scary thing that puts you up on a pedestal. So that's been me with that. The book's been great just because a lot of people have been sort of reaching out and just saying, hey, I really identified with your story and I really liked it. And they share their story, and I'm always moved by that. That's nice. I'm really thankful about the book because I was able to get my foot in the door with SYFY. A couple of people reached out to me from the SYFY network and said, hey, we're casting for a show. One of our writers picked up a copy of your book and was intrigued because you said you do performing, like acting and public speaking and such. Would you like to audition for us? So I mean, without the book, that would have
Oh,
never happened, and that was really cool. So love doing that. That show's called Astrid and Lilly Save the World, by the way. You can find that, I think, on the SYFY network in the States, Wednesday nights at 10. If you're in Canada, you can catch it on crave.ca, CTV, SYFY, I believe CTV-SYFY. But sorry for that shameless plug.
no, it's all right.
That's one of the coolest things to come out of all this is I'm like, wow, I'm on TV. That's fun. So
Yeah, I mean that. I mean,
I enjoyed that.
that leads me to my next question: is what was it like acting on a show?
Sure. I've never I did a lot of background work on Degrassi, which is a very polite way of saying I was an extra. So like I've been on and around sets all throughout high school, but I was never a principal. I never had dialogue. So I always loved going in and seeing this really impressive set and looking at how people do things, but I was always getting I was seeing everything exclusively through the lens of a background performer. So, you talk to the fourth AD, I think is the one that is sort of the liaison between the director and the background. So usually that was it. It was just me talking to that go between, and they were always friendly and polite. But you don't really learn too much there. Uh, Acting in television is interesting because in stand up, there's not so much rigidity. You can really move around. Sort of the joy of doing stand up or acting on stage is that there's the intimacy of occupying the same space as people, right?
Hmm.
And in television, obviously the difference is you're acting like you're incredibly subdued. You can't play out or you're going to eat the camera. So you got to rein it in so that they actually have something usable and something that people can relate to. And the tough thing is that you're just so mindful of the fact that people are going to see this at that point, and you kind of get in your own head, and you got to try and get out of that. Because when you're on stage, the fearlessness comes from the fact that it's like the only people seeing this are here, and this is our little secret, and that's fine. And then when you're in TV, there's like that level of permanence there gets you really self-conscious. So the good news was the cast and crew on Astrid and Lilly were just nothing but gracious and patient. And so for someone like me who was relatively new to that kind of acting and television, they were all really good at being like, no, you're doing good. Like, just hang in there. Like better than that. Like I took to it pretty quick because I went, okay, you gotta play it for the person opposite you. You gotta play it for the people that are here, and just shut up and do your job. So that was kind of it. So I ended up really loving it. I was nervous at first, but
Hmm.
it ended up being really good.
Now let's circle back for a minute about writing your book. Did you have any issues of your own, like dealing with not with the first draft of not always auto correcting yourself?
Yeah, of course. There's a really great quote from Schwartzwald, one of the great writers on The Simpsons, where he said, "Writing is hard, editing is easy. So just crap something out, and then you will have no trouble at all going, oh, this would be better if this was here. This would be better if this was here. So I didn't crap something out. I was, as you said, incredibly self-conscious as I was writing it. And the tough thing about writing it too is that in stand-up, so long as you meet the quota of stage time, like say you're on for anywhere between 5 minutes to an hour, so long as you do that, you're fine. Like the jokes can be any length, and you take as long as you need to tell a story. But at Anik, you know, they said, okay, we need a very particular page number, not exactly like 200 or 300 on the button, but you know, close. So there is that pressure to just have. I'm so sorry, Reed. I took an antihistamine earlier, so I'm a little bit drowsy. It's not your fault at all. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm just, that's the side effect of the allergy med. Uh, the uh, the uh, the the trade-off is that you're like, okay, you got all this space to fill and this space to play in, but then you're kind of like, do I have enough to fill in here? Because the story that they tapped me to write was an autobiographical one. They wanted me to tell about how I got into stand-up, and
Mm.
as if there's any evidence of how hard it's been me trying to think of stories to tell Reed over the course of a 20 to 30 minute interview, you can only imagine how hard it was writing this book over the course of about half a year. So
Yeah,
it's like when it's about yourself, you're just kind of like, man, how do I just want to, it's like, you're not even worried about making yourself look like a dick. You're just worried about getting something on paper. You're just like, God, I need something. So, Anik was unbelievably gracious, and my editor, Paula Ayer, was just tremendous and tremendously patient with me, meeting those deadlines and doing what needed to be done.
yeah. I mean, the reason I ask is I'm writing a book about my experiences. I mean, I have done a lot. I mean, you and I have both done a lot for being Aspies. I've literally gone across the country to school for my master's degree. I've traveled.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've traveled across Europe on my own, 6 different countries. I started a blog. I started my podcast, and my mom was like, "You need to share this with the world." And then everyone's saying you got to write a book about your life, and it's hard because I sit there when I'm typing, and all of a sudden, every little mistake, I'm always going back and correcting, and I'm like, just write, don't correct.
Yeah, remember that Schwarzwald quote? It was when I heard that, it was incredibly useful.
So just crap it out, and then correct it later.
Exactly. Just you need raw material so you can cut. I mean, as a hobby, I really love editing. Like when I'm helping out some friends doing some editing stuff for like say videos or shorts or uh, recordings, like audio recordings, because to me, I'm like, great, I'm just working from the raw materials and I'm finding, like I'm constructing something from that, and that comes really naturally. So it's just, you just got to go, okay, you got to do that, but you got to make the thing first so you can fix it. And that's always tough.
So what's a day in a life? What's a day in a life like for you?
I like to give myself a pretty rigid schedule every day, because if you don't have those routines, every day starts to melt together and you just sleep away your life. Like I work freelance, and when I do work, it's usually at night, or for regular hours. So when I'm not doing stand up and I'm not writing, I like to hold myself to the discipline of, okay, you get up every day between 8 and 9 a.m. And then from there, for hourly blocks from basically 10 to 5 o'clock, you are working on a series of small tasks, each one taking anywhere between half an hour to 90 minutes. And by the end of a year, you find yourself that you've done a lot of multiple things. So you just you keep yourself preoccupied with all sorts of tasks, um, so that you actually have raw material to work from when you're doing your art. I mean, if you're all you're doing is the art, then you're not living life and drawing upon that to inform your art. And then it's boring, right? So it's always good to keep yourself sharp by learning new things and taking to new things and meeting new people. And I mean, that's tough for a lot of people during COVID, because a lot of people are either completely alienated because the only thing that they are permitted to do is work, like be it at home or in a big box store in service, stuff like that. And it's tough because everyone already struggles with the fact that a lot of your relationships are transactional in nature, and now it's become so unbelievably literal in that transaction, like when it comes to transactional relationships. So uh I've been incredibly lucky in that I was able to find a niche that worked out for me, where I'm able to keep myself preoccupied with these other things, because I have a lot of friends and a lot of friends on the spectrum that are struggling right now with that, with the tedium of that kind of work, like in service.
You know, I mean,
And
I,
that's
I
not their
mean,
fault. It's just all that's available.
no, no. I mean, I feel the same way. I could not find work whatsoever, so I made my own. But it's not just that. It's keeping to your own schedule.
Yeah,
It's trying to have that schedule so where you fit it. You know what you're doing every minute, every hour of the day, and you got to hold yourself accountable to it.
yeah, exactly.
Anyways, do you have any sensory issues?
I used to have some pretty severe ones when it came to tactility and sound. Uh, I talk about this in my book a little bit at the beginning. What I hated when I was a kid was a lack of consistency when it came to being like when it just came to like t-shirts and shorts and stuff. To me, I
Mhm.
could only wear long pants and long sleeve shirts, just because the difference in sensory information from the exposed skin and the unexposed skin was sending mixed messages to my brain, and I couldn't do anything. I would like cease up, like a car that needs an oil job. And so that was the big one. And the other one was sound, not because loud noises bugged me, but the disruption of a consistent room tone bugged me. So when I was a kid, I would usually sleep with a noisemaker to prevent
Mm.
to prevent that inconsistency. So those were the two big things. But again, I was really lucky because my parents in Ontario were sort of at the vanguard of a lot of the parent advocacy groups. So they were very quickly into the idea of like, okay, I gotta help my kid, and not in a way that makes him necessarily have to conform to the world, to the world entire, but in a way that actually better accommodates him and his needs. So it's like, okay, well, if he just likes wearing the long sleeve things, then we'll just wear the long sleeve things. Like, they were concessions that didn't require much in the way of detours. So my folks were more than willing to accommodate that.
All right. Do you have any other interests?
Yeah, movies. I love movies. Usually at the end of the day, I like to keep myself it's so this part's just lame, is that for the sorry, or this part's just uh when I was younger, sorry, all I would do is just watch movies. I just purely for the sake of consumption. It was the 1001 movies list. Like, I wasn't actually taking in the meaning or anything from text. I was just consuming, and that wasn't really getting me anywhere, and I wasn't really enjoying stuff. So usually the hobbies that I structure my day around include a lot of the social sciences. So like history, psychology, philosophy, politics, because I want to contextualize the stuff that I'm engaging with, so that I can get a fuller understanding of not only the form of art, but but usually the world that informed, or the culture that informed the form. So uh like, I love movies, and I loved using movies initially as a gateway to learn about the rest of the world, but instead it became using these other subjects to learn more about movies. So it kind of inverted itself. I usually at the end of every day, it's like, not only do I structure the work that I'm doing, I even structure my hobbies, so I'm not like just sitting in front of a TV and my eyes are turning square after a while. Like, I like to keep at it just with all sorts of stuff that I haven't gotten into. So I like to, it's like, okay, I allocate a period where I'm reading, I allocate a period where I'm listening to stuff, and listening to stuff outside of my comfort zone, uh, just to broaden my tastes and all that. Uh, I never really played video games, so usually I I find some period to just learn about stuff that I've never learned about or gotten into, and that's really fun. So, I mean, when it comes to special interests, Here's the thing that I usually like to do. I like to get into things that I've had no interest in, but I have a friend who's really interested and is like, hey, do you want to go see wrestling? Do you want to go see this band that you don't know about? I love that. I live vicariously through my friend's special interests. So I usually that's usually what I like to do. But obviously that's been tough to do during COVID. But
Mhm.
before that, that's usually how I'd like to live.
Now, what advice would you give to those who are finding out they have ASD now?
All right. Well, first of all, you're not alone. So if anything, take solace in the knowledge that there are, and now like people are initially worried about having like a label because they're worried that that's just going to be their personality, like their ego is going to be tethered to that for the rest of their life. And you don't need to worry about that because when I think of a diagnosis, I don't think of it as the definition of you. I think about it as like, okay, a psychiatrist threw a dart on a neurological map, and this is just the general area where the dart landed. So don't worry. This doesn't define you. This is just a part of your personality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is um, now that you actually have a diagnosis, there is innumerable opportunities for resources and community supports, like other people within the autism community or allies of the autism community that are willing to stick their neck out for you to get you the help they can need. So uh, it it can only get better from here now that you have that sense of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thought on it. I hope that helps.
It does. I mean, because I've run across a lot of people in my time, and a lot of people out there are just afraid to get the diagnosis because they're afraid it's going to define them of who they are. They don't like the term disability. They don't like the word autism. They don't like the word Asperger's. It's people. People just got to realize once you get diagnosed, that's when you get the help. Otherwise, you're stuck.
Yeah. Well, anywho, Reed, I don't know if you have any more questions. This has been a lot of fun.
I got three more.
Sure. Okay.
Anyway, what do you like more, acting or doing your comedy?
That's tough because getting into acting now, I'm not Laurence Olivier, but I'm actually loving it because I feel like interpreting other people's material is really fun. And even when you're doing something as silly, like Astrid and Lilly is a deeply silly show, don't get me wrong, but it's fun. It's a sort of a monster of the week type show
Mm-hmm.
for a teenage audience, I believe. And it's a uh, like it's funny about when you're sort of you're interpreting neurotypical writers, or not necessarily a neurotypical, someone that isn't openly identifying themselves as autistic. There, you're interpreting another person's interpretation of ASD, and that's always kind of fun because there's a bit of a broken telephone there. So you're going, okay, how can I make this as true to me as possible within the parameters that I've been given? So that's always an interesting sort of challenge. Uh, I've really taken acting just because that's kind of fun, but I do like stand up because you have so much more agency. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are kind of the cat. Um, like if you're producing your own show, then you're the captain of your own ship. So really, uh, you can really establish the rules of your show in a way that you don't get to in acting because oftentimes in acting, like unless again you are producing your own content, uh, you're sort of at the mercy of the writer, director, etc. Which is fine, you know, because I mean, I was really glad to work with people that I really love working with that were even open to making some of what I felt would ring more authentic to me. Uh, that's the other tough thing is that when you're acting and you're an autistic guy playing an autistic character, there is sort of a pressure to create a textbook definition of autism that will please everyone, and that's impossible because it's so vast, right? Uh, insert Stephen Shore quote here. Like um, I like, you, it's tough when you're tasked with something where you need to uphold a kind of role model like sensibility when it comes to your version of ASD, because I mean everyone's different, right? So
Mhm.
like I think you should probably start with a character first before you start with like a list of diagnostic criteria to tick off. Most of the characters that I tend to identify with in popular culture are not canonically on the spectrum. My identification with them is by happenstance, but that's how art's supposed to work. You don't, you make art for you and you hope other people relate to it. Like that's usually the way that I find it goes. Um, I got off really, sorry, I got off topic there. Reed, you have two other
I got
uh,
one last question,
questions.
actually.
Sure, please.
Where can people find more about you?
Yes, you can find out more about me at www.aspiecomic.com. Michael McCreary hyphen funny you don't look autistic. That's the title of my book. But I mean, sorry but it's also the Facebook page. Go to Facebook, type in Michael McCreary hyphen funny you don't look autistic. You'll find me. That's where you can find me if you're looking for me. Reed, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Not a problem.